The Nazi jet that could have won WW2 but never got the chance in 1944. Allied pilots saw something in the sky, something that moved too fast to follow. Too fast to shoot down, too fast to believe. It wasn't a propeller aircraft, it wasn't anything they had ever seen before. It screamed through the clouds at speeds no plane on Earth could match, and the men who saw it said only one thing: "We are already dead." This machine was real, it existed, it flew, and for one terrifying moment in history. It almost changed everything, so why did the world survive it? The answer is stranger than any fiction. Welcome to WW2 Ghost Wings, the channel where history doesn't sleep, and the past still echoes in the skies. Now, before we go any further, they want to ask something important. If someone's grandfather is watching this right now, a wise soul, someone who has seen enough of this world to know that history always repeats itself, they gently lean over and whisper, "Friend, if this story matters to you, hit that subscribe button. Don't let the young ones find this channel before you do." This channel belongs to those who remember, to those who understand that every war leaves behind ghosts. Subscribe because the stories here are not for everyone. They are for the ones who truly want to know the truth. And tell them, where in this world are they watching from right now? Drop it in the comments below. Whether it's London, Lagos, or Los Angeles, they want to know because history was written everywhere, and so were its consequences. The year was 1944. The skies over Europe were burning. Allied bombers flew in massive formations every single day. Hundreds of aircraft, thousands of men, they believed they owned the sky. They were wrong. Deep inside a secret German facility, engineers and scientists were building something the world had never seen before. Something that did not roar like a normal aircraft engine, something that screamed. It was called the Messerschmitt Me 262. And it was not just another airplane. It was a machine born from a completely different idea. The idea that propellers were already finished, already old, already dead, while every other nation on Earth was still perfecting piston engines and spinning blades. Germany had quietly crossed into another era entirely. The Me 262 ran on jet propulsion, pure thrust, no spinning propeller at the front. Instead, two powerful jet engines hung beneath its swept-back wings, wings that were themselves a radical new design. Angled backward like a bird cutting through a storm. When test pilots first flew it, they could not find the right words. The aircraft did not climb, it launched, it did not fly. It cut through the air like a blade through silk. Its top speed reached 540 miles per hour. The fastest Allied fighter of that time, the legendary P-51 Mustang, could barely reach 440. The gap was not small. The gap was enormous. Allied pilots who encountered the Me 262 in combat described the same terrifying experience. They would line up a target steady, their aim begin to fire, and then the late German jet was simply gone, vanished, not shot down, not destroyed. Just elsewhere, moving at a speed their eyes could not track and their guns could not follow. General Adolf Galland, one of Germany's most celebrated fighter aces, flew the Me 262 for the first time in May 1943. After landing, his face carried an expression no one had seen on him before. He sat quietly for a moment, then said it felt as though angels were pushing. Germany had built a weapon that technically belonged to the next decade. The question was never whether the Me 262 was powerful enough. The question, the one that historians still argue about today, was whether Germany would ever be allowed to use it properly. And the answer to that question came from the very top.
There is a moment in every war when one decision changes everything. Not a battle, not a bombing, not a soldier's bullet, just one man, one room, one word, and in the case of the Me 262, that one word was spoken by Adolf Hitler himself. The year was 1943. Germany's most brilliant aviation minds stood before their leader with something extraordinary in their hands. They had the fastest aircraft ever built. They had the engineers who built it, had the pilots willing to fly it. All they needed was permission to use it the right way as a fighter jet, a sky hunter. A machine designed to tear Allied bombers apart before they ever reached German soil. Hitler listened. He nodded. And then he asked a question that made every man in that room go cold. Can it carry bombs? What followed was not a military decision. It was something far more dangerous. It was ego dressed as strategy. Hitler had become obsessed with the idea of revenge. The Allied bombing campaigns were humiliating. Germany's cities were burning. The German people were suffering. And in his mind, the answer was not defense. It was punishment. He did not want a plane that could protect Germany. He wanted a plane that could bleed England. He ordered the Me-262 to be converted into a bomber. The engineers were horrified silently, carefully, because silence was survival in Hitler's Germany. The problem was not just philosophical, it was physical. The Me-262 was never built to carry heavy bombs. Its elegant swept-wing frame was engineered for speed and agility. Adding bomb racks and heavy payloads did not transform it into a bomber. It transformed it into a crippled jet, slower, harder to control, and stripped of the very qualities that made it dangerous months past precious, irreplaceable months. While Germany's greatest technological weapons sat grounded in modification yards. Allied forces landed at Normandy in June 1944. The Western Front cracked open, the clock already ticking, suddenly began racing. General Galland fought back, he argued, he pleaded. He put his career, and quietly his life on the line, to reverse Hitler's order. He called the Me-262 in its fighter role a gift from God. He knew what it could do against Allied bomber formations. He had seen it, he had felt it, but Hitler did not listen to generals who disagreed. He listened only to himself. It was not until late 1944, after enormous pressure, after catastrophic losses after the war had already begun slipping irreversibly from Germany's hands, that Hitler finally reluctantly allowed the Me-262 to fly as a fighter. By then, the window had not just narrowed. It had closed. History would later calculate the cost of that single decision in something more precise than money or territory. It calculated it in time. And in wartime is the one thing that never comes back. The Me-262 had been ready. The pilots had been ready. The skies over Europe had been waiting, but the man at the top had turned the most advanced weapon of the war into a footnote of his own making. And now, with the Allies closing in from every direction, Germany would try one last time to unleash what it had wasted. Imagine building the fastest car in the world, then running out of road. That was Germany in late 1944. The Me-262 was finally free, finally cleared to hunt. Finally permitted to become what it was always meant to be, a fighter. A predator, a machine that could make Allied pilots question everything they thought they knew about air combat. But freedom had arrived at the worst possible moment. The world Germany once controlled was collapsing, not slowly, but all at once. The pilots who climbed into the cockpits of the Me-262 were not the confident, battle-hardened veterans of 1940. Those men were already gone, dead over Britain, dead over Russia, dead over the deserts of North Africa. What remained were younger pilots, brave certainly, willing absolutely, but they were flying the most advanced aircraft ever built, with barely enough training to survive it. The Me-262 was not a forgiving machine. It demanded precision, it demanded instinct, it demanded a pilot who had thousands of hours of experience behind him, not hundreds. Its jet engines were dangerously temperamental, throttle too fast on takeoff, and the engines would flame out, descend too aggressively, and control would dissolve beneath a pilot's hands like smoke. Several pilots were killed not by enemy fire, but by the aircraft itself rebelling against those who had not yet earned its respect. And then there was fuel. The jet engines of the Me-262 did not run on standard aviation fuel. They required J to kerosene, a specialized resource that Germany, already strangled by Allied bombing of its oil infrastructure, could barely produce. Entire squadrons sat grounded on airfields, not because of enemy action, but because the fuel simply never arrived. Pilots would walk to their aircraft in the early morning cold, ready to fight, ready to fly, and find nothing waiting for them but empty tanks and silence. The Allies, meanwhile, had identified something critical. The Me-262 had one profound, unavoidable vulnerability. It was slow at takeoff and landing. Those screaming jet engines needed long runways and careful, gradual acceleration. And in those brief, fragile minutes when the aircraft was most vulnerable, it was just another machine. Allied commanders acted with brutal efficiency. They did not try to outrun the Me-262 in the sky. They did not try to outmaneuver it. Instead, they sent P-51 Mustangs and Spitfires to circle German airfields like patient wolves. They waited. In the moment a Me-262 began its slow, thundering takeoff roll, they struck. German pilots began calling their own airfields killing zones. The Allies also unleashed relentless bombing campaigns, not just on German cities, but specifically on the runways, hangars, and fuel depots that kept the Me-262 operational one by one, the airfields that housed Germany's greatest weapon were reduced to craters and burning wreckage. Entire squadrons of Me-262s, some still in their hangars, untouched, unfueled, unflown, were destroyed on the ground without ever facing a single enemy in the sky. There were moments of brilliance still. JV-44, the elite squadron assembled by General Galland himself, staffed with Germany's finest surviving aces, flew the Me-262 with devastating effectiveness. When conditions allowed in isolated engagements, they tore through Allied bomber formations with a ferocity that sent shockwaves through Allied high command. One Me-262 could destroy multiple heavy bombers in a single pass. The mathematics were terrifying, but mathematics alone could not win a war. Numbers could, resources could, time could. In Germany had run out of all three by early 1945. The picture was irreversible. Soviet forces were pouring into Germany from the east. Allied armies were crossing the Rhine from the west. The skies above, once contested, once feared, now belonged almost entirely to the Allies. The Me-262 flew on. Stubbornly, desperately, its pilots fighting not with any real hope of victory, but with something older and quieter than hope.
At pride, duty,
and the refusal to stop. But a machine, no matter how extraordinary, cannot fly without fuel, cannot fight without pilots, cannot survive without infrastructure. One by one, the engines went silent, the runways were empty, and the fastest aircraft the world had ever seen sat abandoned and muddy. German fields engines, cold cockpits, open to the rain as Allied soldiers walked past them in disbelief. The war was ending, but the story of the Me-262 was only just beginning.
Audius.
Wars end, but ideas never die. When Allied soldiers swept across Germany in the final weeks of 1945, they were searching for many things: prisoners' documents, hidden treasures of a collapsing empire. But the most valuable discovery they made was sitting quietly on abandoned airfields' wings, swept back, engines cold. Cockpits empty, the Messerschmitt Me, 262. What happened next was not history recorded in bold headlines or victory parades. It was something quieter, something that happened in laboratories and research facilities behind closed doors, in conversations between engineers who spoke different languages but shared the exact same expression when they looked at what Germany had built. That expression was disbelief. American forces launched Operation Paperclip, a classified program designed to collect not just German aircraft, but German minds, scientists, engineers, aviation specialists. The very men who had designed and built the Me-262 were quietly transferred to American soil, given new identities, new laboratories, and one simple instruction: keep working. The Soviet Union did precisely the same thing, with equal urgency and considerably less patience. Both superpowers understood something with absolute clarity in those final days of 1945: whoever mastered jet aviation would own the future. The Me-262's influence did not whisper into the next generation of aircraft. It screamed into it. The swept-wing design, once considered radical, almost reckless, became the foundation of every serious jet fighter that followed. The American F-86 Sabre, the Soviet MiG-15, both aircraft that would face each other above the frozen hills of Korea just 5 years later, both carrying the unmistakable genetic fingerprint of a German jet that never truly got its chance. The engineers who studied the Me-262's airframe did not just copy its shape, they decoded its philosophy, the revolutionary understanding that speed itself was a weapon, that an aircraft fast enough could rewrite every rule of engagement, could make radar systems obsolete, could make traditional dogfighting as ancient as sword fighting. Every modern fighter jet flying today, the F-22, the Eurofighter, the Su-57, carries within its design the distant but undeniable echo of what those German engineers conceived in a wartime factory more than 80 years ago. But the question that historians return to again and again across decades of study and argument is not about technology, it is about time. What if Hitler had never interfered? What if the Me-262 had been deployed as a pure fighter in 1943? A full year and a half earlier than it actually was, the calculations are sobering. A properly deployed fleet of Me-262 fighters in 1943 could have made Allied bombing campaigns over. Germany, catastrophically expensive. Without air superiority, the DIE invasion of June 1944 becomes an almost impossible gamble without DIE. The entire timeline of the war shifts, not necessarily toward a German victory, because by 1943, Germany faced enemies on every front with resources already stretched beyond recovery. But historians agree on one thing. With unusual consistency, it would have lasted longer, cost more. Bled deeper, the Me-262 was not just a weapon. It was a mirror reflecting every contradiction of the Nazi regime that built it. A system capable of breathtaking genius and breathtaking stupidity in almost equal measure. A regime that could engineer the future and then hand that future to the wrong man to destroy. In the end, the Me-262 did not lose because it was inferior. It's lost because of one man's ego, one leader's obsession. One fatal, irreversible decision made in a room full of people too afraid to say the word no. Today, preserved examples of the Me-262 sit in museums across America, Europe, and beyond. Visitors walk past them slowly. They study the swept wings. They look at the twin jet engines. They read the plaques that explain what this machine was, what it could do, what it almost became. And sometimes a visitor will stop, will stand completely still in front of it. And in the quiet of that museum hall, surrounded by the soft footsteps of strangers and the distant hum of modern life, they will feel something strange and difficult to name. It's not admiration exactly, not fear, something older than both. The recognition that history is not just made by armies and nations and grand strategies. Sometimes it is made by a single wrong decision. And the world, without ever knowing it, holds its breath, survives. This has been WW2 Ghost Wings. The skies remember everything, even what we try to forget. Until next time, keep looking up.